Hi, everyone. I'm Cynthia Garrett. Welcome to the sessions. I am always excited about what's going on every episode, but I'm especially excited for this week's journey to begin because our guest is someone whose life has impacted and touched many. He didn't even start out wanting to do that, as the story goes, but most of you around the world have heard of him or seen the film, The Shack. At over 20 million copies to date, Paul Young has become a phenomenon that I can't even explain, and I'm really happy to meet you. Welcome.
I am thrilled to be with you. Thank you.
So where are you coming to us from? You're in the United States right now, huh?
Yep, up in the Pacific Northwest, greater Portland, Oregon area.
All right, so
Yep.
live from Portland.
Beautiful up here.
Yeah, I love Oregon.
I know. I do too.
Portland's a beautiful
city.
city.
It's one of the most unchurched states in the Union and the easiest place to talk about Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think when you've tried it, when there is no church and there's nothing to fill up on spiritually, you try everything else, right? And then when you don't fill the void, eventually someone coming to you with the truth is really, it's your fertile ground.
Well, I think it works a different way. I think that that a lot of places, like in the Bible Belt of the United States, you don't end up talking about Jesus. You end up disagreeing about doctrine. And folks that don't have that frame of reference are interested about Jesus. They don't care a lot about doctrine, and so it becomes a much more upfront part of the conversation.
Okay.
Plus, they have a great respect for what goes on internally inside a human being, as opposed to some form of law. Yeah.
Okay, now you really went there. That actually is that's very accurate, and I very much agree with you. And I think, I want to talk about your journey, but while we're on the subject of, honestly, Christians judging and persecuting each other, the book, The Shack, you talk about doctrine. The book, The Shack, had so many differing opinions, which I found really, even when I saw the movie, I could relate to your experience of God in these different ways. So I'm curious as to how you've found peace and an ability to love your brothers and sisters who might actually want to rip apart a work that is an expression of your heart.
Well, it really doesn't bother me. At least angry people are engaged, right? Ambivalent people just don't care. And when a person is upset, they're not telling me about me unless I don't know who I am. They're coming to tell me in the only language they know how about what matters to them. And frankly, most of them haven't even read it or haven't seen it, the ones that are perturbed about it. And they're my people, almost exclusively modern evangelical fundamentalists. I have this line that I think the Holy Spirit gave me, and that is, the only time you'll find God in a box is because he wants to be where we are.
Oh.
Isn't that good?
That's really good. Oh, that's really good. Because I know one of the journeys of my life has been, I've said to people, don't put me in a box. Stop trying to put me in a box. God doesn't, my God's not that small. But man, he sure is in the box with them, though, also.
Well, and they're not them. They're us. They're my people.
Right.
And the last thing we need to do is show the world that we know how to divide even more. It's time not to do that anymore. Let's open our arms as wide as Jesus has ever done.
Yeah. Now,
being the body of Christ, you'd think we might do that,
Yeah. No, trust me, I understand. I think someone said something to me recently. I spoke in Washington, D.C. at the National Prayer Breakfast. And before I spoke, a young pastor friend of mine, Pastor Greg from the Rock Church in San Diego, California, called me and he said, I have a word for you. And I said, what, Greg? And he said, you are the you in unity, and unity begins with you. Nice. And I was like, whoa. And never have we really needed the church to be unified more, because our nations are ripped apart.
Yeah. And religion does that.
Hmm.
You know, I tell people, only be a Christian when it's helpful. You know,
I love that.
Uh,
I love that.
yeah.
I love that.
Paul was only a Roman when it was helpful.
Yes. Wow, that's very good. You're right. Very good. Okay, so let's back up a little bit, and I would love for you to share your testimony. Your parents were missionaries, and your journey, honestly, starts there.
It does. Born Grand Prairie, Alberta, up in northern Alberta, Canada, and then at less than a year old, the three of us, I was the firstborn of four eventually, but the three of us moved to the highlands of New Guinea, where I grew up as a missionary kid. And, you know, growing up in a multicultural world, even though you don't know it at the time, it gives you great benefits and wonder that will eventually pay off in many respects as you become exposed to a larger world. But inside that world also was some great sadnesses, huge losses that included a very difficult relationship with my dad. Um, I didn't know as a child that he had been absolutely obliterated as a child himself. You know, I only knew the furious man and who was holding on to Jesus, but at the same time didn't know what to do with his baggage. You know, that was a generation that didn't even know they had baggage and
They didn't
wouldn't have
talk
known what
about it.
to do. Yeah. No, they did duty really well, but they didn't do fathering very well.
No.
And he didn't have a chip for being a dad, and that had been broken in him before I ever showed up. Sexual abuse started for me in the tribal culture, the family who raised me, because my parents were busy doing the missionary thing, and and so it was the ones who I believed loved me that were the primary abusers. I'm almost exclusively at the hands of the men. And then at 6 years old, I'm sent to boarding school, Christian missionary boarding school.
Mm.
And the big boys at night would come molest the little boys. And that was part of the damaged system that was in place at the time. And nobody was talking about it. When you're a child and you're told that if you tell your secrets, there will be people who will go to hell and their blood will be on your hands. I mean, you end up with a whole world of hurt that is hidden behind secrets. And we are as sick as the secrets we keep.
Wow, isn't that the truth? You know, that
Yeah.
statement alone is why I was sexually abused as a child, and for my viewers who know my testimony, I was then raped as a teenager, and there was a point in my life where I had to
Sorry.
speak. Thank you, and I have an equal, like empathy with your
I know.
story because I get it. And part of why I think your story is so important is, well, we're only as sick as the secrets we keep. That's what makes me talk about it. That's what makes me seek to liberate others from this issue. And you're so important because in my experiences, a lot more men are sexually abused than actually speak about it.
Absolutely, because it's part of the male macho persona that you can't even allow that to be a possibility. What does that say about your masculinity? And so there's a whole nother level of shame. But
Right.
men have always had two steps to go for every one that a woman has had to go. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, very interesting statement. I agree. Do you feel at a certain point that your parents knew what was going on in
No,
your journey or no?
no, they didn't know. And it wasn't until after the shack that they even began to step into that space. And they haven't even done it very well. I've never had a real conversation because like my dad didn't have the capacity. My mom just passed on New Year's Eve day. And we have yet to work out some things, which we will.
Oh, I so get that. I've not had. My mom has a real inability to have that conversation, and I think it's parents of that generation, as you said before, they didn't really talk about things,
Yeah.
and broken people break other people.
Yeah. And not only that, to talk about it would be to tap into the shame that was such an underlying reality in their existence. And they had no tools
Yeah.
by which to even begin to have a conversation about this. And, you know, it's to say as a child, I was sexually abused. The parent feels like, why didn't I know? Why didn't I have the eyes to see? What is wrong with me? And it's such a horrible
Hmm.
pile of junk to have to deal with that it's almost better to let's wait till we die and then we'll work it out.
Yeah, well, I think it's like you said, it's so overwhelming. I think of how I would feel as a parent if this
Yeah.
happened to my son and I didn't know. I, I think I would probably crumble under the weight of guilt or a feeling
Yeah.
that I failed or I did my most important job incorrectly. So
Yeah.
I've learned to have compassion for the fact that my mom probably can only deal as best she can.
Yeah. And everybody brings to the table what they have.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't have a chip for being a dad, but I didn't know that. And it took me years. You know, what made it worse was that he was a preacher and a missionary
Hmm.
because all of that was wrapped up inside religious language. And so it took me 50 years to wipe the face of my father off the face of God. And because I
Wow.
had the same abusive kind of understanding of the character and nature of God. You know, he was the darkness behind Jesus. He was the one who needed the sacrifice, needed to be appeased. He was the one that was vengeful, wrathful, retributive, and he was the one that Jesus came to save me from, just
Whoa.
like Jesus came to save me from my own dad.
Wow. I have often said before that sadly, the relationship most of us have with God is in some way affected by the relationship we have with our earthly parent, usually father, right? So it's very
Yeah,
difficult for some people to see God the Father as a good God.
yeah,
And that's why I think, in the movie, when you chose Octavia Spencer, a black woman, to be
mm,
God, I got it because there's this maternal thing, I think, when you are abused, and I'm stating a theory. I'd love to hear your comment on it. My belief is that we need to experience God as a father, as a mother, and he usually loves us in those terms because he has such a deep knowledge of how we need to receive love.
right, right. He approaches us in the language that we can appreciate and receive. And that may be God. You know what? I have a friend who works a lot with women who have come out of trafficking, who've been very abused. And he said recently to me, he said that the number one way that God comes to these women is as a black Labrador retriever, a dog, because they've been so violated by men and women that it takes another way for God to bridge the space between the damage of their heart and their ability to apprehend the character and nature of goodness. And also in passing, I want to say that yes, it is sad that a lot of our perspective of God is derived from our experience with our families and parents and all that, but it works the other way around too. I want to celebrate the many people who have been raised with encouragement and affirmation and goodness. Whenever I hear about people who were loved well, I'm absolutely thrilled to the core of my being. So many people picked up a sense of God that was comforting and caring and encouraging and affirming, and I think we're seeing more of that as we learn how to deal with our baggage. Yeah.
Well, in terms of dealing with baggage, so I mean, you get to be how old when the abuse stops, and then life obviously becomes something else because now you're carrying something. What
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about your journey.
Well, to use the metaphor of the shack as the house that people help you build, the house on the inside, the broken heart, the broken soul, right? To use that as the metaphor, the place we get stuck, but it's our own heart, and that because of shame, which I think is the most fundamental driver in the human existence, negative driver, and and we store our addictions in the shack. We hide our secrets in the shack. We never want another human being to come into that place because we're terrified that if we actually looked them in the eyes, we would see the look of disgust that we see in the mirror. So we take some timbers from our shack and we take them out 100 yards and we build a facade that we can paint as fast as we can pick up people's expectations. And we learn to survive by living from the outside in because nothing on the inside is of any value. And that's the broken place. We keep our secrets because if I tell you the truth about what I think about myself, that you will hate me as much as I do. But I need even if I don't believe it's real, I still need your kindness and your grace and your affection and your approval. But I don't believe it's real because you don't know the secrets. So I'm absolutely locked into my
Prison.
brokenness. Yep, yep. And I learned to call it home. That's what
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned to say, this is home. And then we have theology that comes on top of that and says, yeah, you are worthless. And we have these stupid songs that you sing like, you are good, but there's nothing good in me. Crazy stuff. And it's just to reinforce the sense that the truth of our being is something awful. And I'm going like, are you kidding me? Do you think God would become anything that is not very good and he becomes fully human? What does that say about our humanity? That if we try to build a life based on the lies we've been told, that all you are is a worthless piece of
Right.
and good luck trying to build some kind of performance mentality that is good enough to be acceptable to God or to the church or to anybody else.
Right.
Rather than, guess what? The process of transformation in your life is not about you becoming something you weren't. It's about uncovering the truth of who you've been the whole time. You were a very good creation before anything got broken. And
Yeah.
wholeness can only happen when the way of your being matches the truth of your being. And what's the truth of your being? The truth of your being is that you are kind. You're made in the image and likeness of God. Come on. You're kind, you're good, you're patient, you're pure of heart. You are furious at that which hurts the ones you love. See, this is the truth of your being.
Yeah.
But until the Holy Spirit begins to open your eyes and you learn how to agree with that, you're going to still function as if you're that broken person, and that's the truth of your being.
It's boy, oh boy, you're a preacher too.
Whatever.
Yeah, you're a preacher too.
I'm I'm surrounded by people who love me but aren't impressed. So
I
hey,
love that. I love that. I love that. Me too. Me too.
it's the best.
It's good because it keeps you constantly over yourself, and you sort of know that you go to the bathroom the same way everybody else does.
Of course.
You
Of
know,
course.
I got to go to something you're saying that is so powerful to me. This is an identity issue, see,
At the core.
yeah, at the core it is, and I believe, and I'm curious to know your take on this. I believe that these experiences that happen to us in life, they cause this emotional brokenness, and because people, especially in the church, don't know how to deal with emotional brokenness, we just don't deal with it at all, or we demonize everything, or it has to be a spiritual attack. And now I believe that the enemy can get into this mess, and boy, can he sure poke into our wounds. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is allowing God to heal our own emotional brokenness from the things that happen in our past.
Yeah, no question about it. And we can't do it alone.
Right.
Everything that is wrong drives us to isolation,
Yes.
and to the imagination of aloneness,
Yeah.
right? And secrets drive you to aloneness, lies drive you to aloneness, addiction drives you to aloneness. Everything about health moves you in the direction of relationship because we're made in the image of a God who's never been alone. Aloneness is not even real,
Right.
right?
No, you're right. It's funny.
And
We're created for fellowship.
we're created by fellowship for fellowship. right? We're created in the middle of a relationship between three persons, other-centered, self-giving love.
Mm.
And we're created in the image of that. So this is why exposure becomes so essential to wholeness. When it
Right.
says that the Holy Spirit convicts the world, the word convict, and the world would include me, right? The word convict is the Greek word to expose. And he doesn't expose us in order to shame us. He
Right.
exposes our shame in order to heal us.
Absolutely.
But as long as we're holding on to it, God submits to our right to do that. But he will love us to the place that we are finally willing to open up our hands and let go of the very skills that may have kept us alive, but are now inhibitors to actual relationship.
Whew, I love an overcomer. You are an overcomer. Okay, so but from this,
I'm a grandfather, is what I am. So.
well, you overcame childhood, my God, and
Oh,
parenthood. I'm
yes.
still overcoming parenthood. I'm getting there.
Oh, desperation and grace, let me tell you.
Yeah, I know him well. I know him well. They're no stranger in my house. So, but
Yeah.
okay, so the journey from there to this wisdom means you encounter, how did you encounter
Oh,
God though? How did you
I,
really make him yours?
I always pursued God because, well, Jesus particularly,
Yes.
because Jesus was the only one who never left. And from the time I was a child. So the pursuit of the flashes of beauty, and like Dostoevsky says, uh, beauty is what will change the world, and we get affected by it, whether it's in music or the writings of others or creation or whatever. So I encountered God in many things and people and creativity, and but um, but that doesn't heal you, you know. Um,
No.
and I could, like many, I think men in the West, we got stuck in our heads because our hearts were broken and we didn't know how to access them.
We
And
got
so,
stuck in our heads because our hearts were broken. Tweet that.
yeah, yeah, we got stuck in our heads, and therefore we learned to survive by being thinking beings, as C.S. Lewis would say, men without chess, right?
Yeah.
And and that's what I did. Um, it's the only place I knew that I had some sense of control, or thought I did,
Right.
even though my addictions were kind of like proving that I didn't.
Right.
And I drug this into my marriage. And if you ask me when did I truly encounter God, I would say it's in Kim, my wife.
Ah,
This woman who comes from a large family, salt of the earth people, um, and she is not a meek, mild, submitted person. She is a powerful human being. And I laugh. I say, I married the wrath of God, right? And but I believe the wrath of God is the love of God, that it will not stand idly by while anything that is not of love's kind remains in me. That's a George MacDonald idea.
I love that.
And you know, but I drug it in and I kept my inside world a secret. I kept the broken shack behind the facade, and I did the best I could. Not trying to be duplicitous, just hoping that if I could perform perfectly, maybe one day I could become a real boy, you know?
Yeah.
And and then my world blew up. I broke the world, and got caught. Some of us are too broken to really admit that we need help. We have
Right.
to get caught, and
What?
that is a great kindness and it's a terrible grace,
Yeah.
but essential. Yeah.
Well, and thus she had the ability to show you God, because when she caught you, she was able to love
Uh-huh.
you. Can I ask you what it is that you
Furious love.
right? Can I ask?
Part. Yeah, what it was?
Yeah, what was it that she caught you? You say I got caught.
Oh, yeah, January 4th, 94, about 2:15 in the afternoon. I'm having Vietnamese food with my friend Steve at a restaurant, and I get a one-sentence phone call. I'm waiting for you at your office, and I know. And this is after our sixth child is born.
Oh,
And and what she knew was I was in a 3-month affair with one of her best friends.
ah,
And at that point, I had to choose whether to kill myself or face Kim, because I was done running. And killing myself would have been the last way to run away before actually hitting the bottom.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I don't even know how I made it across town, drove into my office. She's already there. She's already taken it, dismantled it, right?
Yeah.
And and she lit into me, and 4 hours into our first conversation, I said to her, if we're going to do this, I need to tell you every secret I have, because secrets have been killing me my whole life. And she said, naively, bring it on. And it took me the better part of 4 days, and it destroyed her. And she wanted to know every detail about everything, and I told her everything. And she said, I will never believe another word that comes out of your mouth the rest of your life. And that started really an 11-year journey of, you could say, dismantling and rebuilding. But I like what a friend of mine said recently. Instead of the violent metaphors of deconstruction and reconstruction, how about if we talked about taking a damaged masterpiece that was found in an attic and beginning to clean it off and restore the colors that were there to begin with. And that took Kim and I 11 years to heal. 11 years. And I didn't think it would ever happen, you know. And but I had hit the bottom, which means I was owning it. I wasn't pointing fingers anymore.
Right.
And I pulled the yellow pages off the shelf and looked under counselors and went to total strangers and said to these people, can you help me? Because I couldn't save the marriage. I'd blown that up. I couldn't fix Kim. I couldn't fix myself, which was obvious. And it was, if I can't find a way to change, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And off the yellow pages, I meet Scott Mitchell, who becomes my therapist. And later my friend.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I slowly begin to unravel the damages and rebuild. And it was after those 11 years that I felt like, oh my gosh, look, I'm the same person in every situation.
Yeah.
I'm not all broken up. And I have no addictions and I have no secrets. And yes, we lost things in that process, but Kim and I are the best we've ever been. And I'm going like, hey, now I can do something she's been asking me. Write a book.
And at this point, we're out of time. We're going to pick up with you for next week's session. I know you've got to be riveted to your television, so you want to come back next week when we will continue our journey with Paul Young, the author of The Shack, and other books. I mean, we're so focused on that. We're going to promote those also. We're going to talk about those. But we're going to stop right here at this point of being caught by the Lord and found at the same time. I'll see you next week. I'm Cynthia Garrett. Hi, everybody. It's me, Cynthia Garrett, and I hope you're enjoying the sessions. And I just wanted to drop in on you and remind you to pick up a copy of my book, Prodigal Daughter, A Journey Home to Identity. I wrote this book because I realized that we are all prodigal kids, you know, and there was a time in my life when I ran off looking for love in all the wrong places and ended up in a world of trouble. But I met my maker and I found my identity in that mess that God turned into a message. So you can go to cynthiagarrett.org and get information about how to get my book online and at booksellers everywhere. I promise it'll bless you.